Hello, welcome back. It's time for another training game. I've been on a bit of a losing streak of late, despite the tactics sessions and the training, so sometimes that happens. Gonna try and get back on the winning bandwagon now, so without further ado, let's see. Doing tactics and that is all well and good, but you also have to really have a good feeling for the arc of the game, and a game itself is very different than just abstract puzzles, so that is what we're going to be practicing here as a game itself. So let's now get into the mind frame that we're actually in this battle as it stands. And these are theoretical moves. I've been playing this opening a lot in this channel so far, this Alapin version of the Sicilian. It's what I've been training for essentially, and what I plan to play as white in the upcoming Canberra Chess Club Championship. Now, I'm pretty sure I can play this move. I'm not entirely sure, but it's hard to anticipate this move being too bad. Of course, he can pin my knight here, but I can, at the very least, just unpin my knight. I guess in this game, what I want to do to separate myself from what I've been doing when I've been losing is probably actually trying to calculate a few more definite lines. That's what International Master John Bartholomew seems to do. So at the same time, to start with, I will also try and keep myself healthy on the clock. And since this move really can't be too bad, and it prepares me to castle, I'm happy to sort of start this way. And now that my knight is adequately defended, maybe now I can think about moves like c4. Another sort of benefit of thinking about c4 now is there's no check available to the queen, because my bishop actually blocks any potential check there. So after c4, whilst the queen can technically still come to e4, I then just develop the knight with a tempo. And that queen is going to have to move. Now, there might be an argument that after c4 he could play something like queen takes, but that certainly doesn't work because, again, my bishop is now nicely placed. So I somewhat think that c4 should lead to the kind of position where this queen has to move. That queen should have to move there. If he simply takes here with the bishop, no problem, we take the queen and life is good. So I think that queen has to move, and most likely it would probably go straight back to d8. It doesn't want to take up this square, take it away from the knight. This takes away from the bishop. This also potentially takes back from the knight, but it's possible. It would be on the same diagonal as the king there, and I suppose he'll be okay in that scenario. The other thing I have to be sort of worrying about or questioning is, if he does come back to one of these squares, can I then castle? Or does that give him the option to take my knight, and when I take back, to take this pawn, because he'll be attacking it with both his queen, wherever it ends up, and this pawn. So after c4, and the queen moves, maybe I can't yet castle. Maybe instead I have to develop this bishop to just add an extra defender to this pawn. Or otherwise, maybe even I can move this pawn one step further forward, allowing a trade and allowing him to come back down. So maybe it's slightly premature. Maybe I should just castle instead, but that does give him the opportunity to take. I suppose I can just take back and everything is fine. He could also push this pawn, but I suppose there I also should assume that everything is fine for me. If he pushes the pawn after I castle, could I play check? Even though he can play this move, can I then play bishop takes pawn? And if he takes queen, I take queen. And after he takes bishop, maybe not. Maybe I can't do that. Maybe I should think about this check right away, or even this check right away. Maybe even after c4, I can consider particularly if he comes back all the way to d8, I could consider a check here. c4, he moves. I just have to be aware that this pawn potentially falls. That's essentially what this is coming down to. If he goes back here, maybe I could develop this bishop out far, but do you know what? I'm going to castle. Because I really didn't see where this was going, and I've already spent a few minutes on it. And again, I don't think this move can be very wrong. Even if he does, if he takes, no worries, I just take back in one or other ways. If he pushes, it just somehow seems wrong. I can't quite prove it, but I'm definitely not worse if he does that. So now I might be ready, however. I might be ready to play this c4. He has brought an extra defender, though, to the pawn. But I'm not sure that that necessarily matters because his queen is attacked and he can't take with the queen, for he would lose the queen. So I think he does still need to take like so. And then when the queen moves, perhaps there's an argument now to push the pawn, even though he takes, queen comes back. Is there an argument for it? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe after this, and he moves back, maybe I can take this pawn off the board. If we trade queens, I can say I don't mind about that. At least my rook here will prevent him from castling. So, and if he just takes like this, maybe this pawn's not doing a whole lot. So rather than being over ambitious and over greedy, I think I'm just going to continue on in a pretty kind of standard fashion. Maybe a move like h3 makes good sense, because if he takes and I take, well, then I get my bishop to a better square with a tempo on the queen anyway. And I've made a little hidey hole for my king in future, potentially. Maybe because this bishop is actually x-rayed twice, but only defended once, maybe I can jump my knight away and gain some sort of tempo. Perhaps I can develop my other knight to maybe a move like this, where it eyes up potentially this nice square from which it would threaten this. I know that's a long-term plan, but the immediate short-term plan may also include bringing the bishop here, or bringing the knight here and then around to here, which is an idea I don't mind. I could also do it from here if I wanted to not put my knight on the rim, where it potentially is grim. So this might be slightly more principled. It's just that it blocks my queen's view of this pawn. So can he take the pawn in that case? If he takes, well, I can take back. He takes. I take. Hitting his bishop, keep in mind. Why is this very, very difficult to calculate sometimes, isn't it? I don't think he should be able to take, to be honest. But I can avoid all of that by just playing knight a3, if I'm aiming for here anyway. Don't think he can really stop me from getting in there, unless he plays like knight a5. But if he plays knight a5, that allows me to play knight b5 and threaten this fork, as well as this pawn. So I'm going to play this. Could be a mistake in view of maybe him now playing this move. But maybe even there, maybe I still just continue on with this plan. Threatening this big fork. I'm going to do it. Threatening this fork. And also just threatening to jump back and win this pawn back. Maybe I'll even do it this way so that I'm threatening this bishop, as mentioned earlier. So I've got to be careful, because if I do it like this, yeah, maybe I can take this bishop, but the moment this bishop leaves this diagonal is the moment he can also take here. So perhaps what I really want to do is actually take with the pawn. Crazy as this all seems. And this all does seem a little crazy. He's got now 3 attackers or defenders of this pawn. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders. So I think we should be right. We should be right to just take back and say, I think my position is still good. I think my position here is still good. It maybe feels a little bit awkward. But, his king could potentially become vulnerable. I think that moves like c4 are still possible. And not only possible, but the queen doesn't have a lot of squares to go to there. Those would be the only safe squares for the queen, the ones I've just pointed out. I sort of have to be a little bit careful about my queen, given its alignment with his rook. But there should be some nice ideas here for me if I'm able to come up with them. So one option is this c4 move. That's an option. If the queen were to come here, we would have bishop d2 hitting the queen again. I'm just gaining some tempo, but we don't have to play that way. We could also play a move like queen c2. Queen c2 I think is a nice move. I think it's a nice move because if he ever takes this knight, I can take back with a check for what that's worth. It might not be worth that much. What I can also do maybe is try and play like c4 to move the queen. Wherever the queen moves, I can then take the knight. And if he takes with this pawn, he's got a pretty awkward pawn structure around his king at that stage. And if instead he takes with the queen, well then possibly I can just push the pawn forward again, hitting this bishop. What I'm trying to get at is if I can move this bishop out the way, then perhaps I can put a rook on this c-file and just shove this pawn down the board. So maybe that's what we ought to do, and maybe we should just shore up the position a little bit rather than, maybe doing something like this, which could be deemed over-ambitious or ambitious. Pinning the knight, it's true, and that is certainly nice, but he could remove the defender. If my bishop here, it's defended by the knight. So if he removes the knight, I would have to take back with my knight in order to keep this defended. But that would give him a chance to trade queens, which again, not necessarily such a bad thing if that happens. So why don't we go one or two steps deeper here? If this actually happens, we trade queens. Then what has he got? Probably still nothing particularly dangerous. Maybe he can jump his knight in here. Maybe that's what he would like to do, is jump his knight in here. But he can't do that really as long as I've got this knight pinned. So maybe that is a nice idea, and it is connected with putting my rook here. So you know what? Yes, let's give this one a go. Even though he can trade queens, I think it's quite nice that we do pin this knight and that we allow ourselves to continue development in a very natural way. So we'll continue on like this and see what he wants to do. So he takes, and that probably, is a good move. What he's, I think, doing is if we take back, then he wants to take here. So that after we take back, he can then win this, like I said, potentially vulnerable bishop. But is it all so simple? Firstly, if we take and he then takes here, we can insert a check first and foremost. He can probably just move the king out of the way. But then do we have any particular follow-up? I'm not so sure. Not so sure we have a particular follow-up there. So since he's just won one of our knights, what we could also do is maybe take one of his knights. He can then insert this move, check, however. And then after we take back, he's won a knight, we've won a knight, he's won a knight, we've won a knight. Then if he takes this bishop, we can take the queen. If he takes this queen, we can take here. You know what? I think this is all right, but I think this is the way to do it. I think we have to take this knight first so that this bishop doesn't end up hanging after this knight falls. Here it hangs, but it's also taken a knight. So we're all sort of even Steven for the moment. So, okay, so he takes here, and that's a fair move. Now I can take the queen, which would be interesting. Actually, I can't because I'm checked. So basically here I am forced to take the knight back, which I will. I'm threatening the rook here. Most likely he's going to take here to threaten my queen, force me to ruin my pawn structure, and then take the bishop, at which point I've seemed to have lost a piece in this whole combination. So again, it looks as though the losing streak is going to continue. I just haven't really been able to clear my mind enough to play proper chess, to actually calculate real lines. So as it happens, he just takes this straight away, and that's fair. But is it correct? Gives me a chance to attack his queen. So if he takes my queen now, I can take back, at least pushing his queen about a little bit. Do I want to just push this c4 pawn, attack his queen? Well, if that's done again, he takes here. I can take back. This queen probably still has to move. Certainly can't take because a rook will land there, which was the whole idea of moving the bishop out in the first place. So I kind of think that's probably what we have to do. Let's follow through with the plan and say, yeah, you can take here, you can ruin my pawn structure, and you can bring a rook to the g file, forcing my king to the h square, h8. But will I have any kind of compensation by opening up this c file? I mean, I'll have some compensation, but I certainly don't think I'm going to have a full piece worth. So just, I don't know what the issue is. Tactically, I'm not operating at the moment. It felt like this bishop g5 move was shaky, but I played it anyway. To be honest, it felt like my position was shaky already at that point in time. So, yeah, just... And also, he's playing really well. He's playing an excellent game. Because if he takes here now, and I take back, regardless of if I take with the knight, with the queen or the pawn, doesn't matter how I take back, his next move is going to be checkmate. So, you know, that makes things difficult because it essentially means this knight is undefended. Even though the queen is sitting here, it's not doing enough. It's not doing anywhere near enough. I certainly don't have time to put anything on the c file because, again, he takes. And I can't take back. My queen is under fire. I'm about to get checkmated. If I do something like this, I directly lose the knight. So I might have to play a move like h3. So that after he takes, and I take back, and maybe he even takes again, but at least I'm not immediately mated. It's a shockingly bad position once again. But that is the way it is. Even this one, after take, he can take the pawn. He's still got a lot of pressure here. So h3 might be the only way to still have a horrible position. Let's do it. And I'll have to take with the queen if he takes, because otherwise the pressure that he has here is just still too much to bear. I can't get away with a move like this. So of course he takes this way. He wants me to take this so that when I take back, he still has this pressure on the h square. That's what he wants. Let's not give it to him. We could do a move like this. If we have a queen trade, fine. That might just be what we have to do. We could also just attack this bishop one more time. That's what I'm going to do. I'm very low on time as well. Somehow he's got 12 minutes more than me. So really, I've been on a bad streak lately. Been on a really bad streak. And by rights, I should be better than this guy. I'm not saying because I'm 17-10, but I think when I'm playing my best, I play a lot better than 17, probably play better than 1800 or 1850. But I'm certainly not playing at my best. I'm pretty much playing at my worst for the past few days. Maybe I need a little break from chess. It's not clear to me, but perhaps that is the case. Okay, so this guy continues playing fantastic moves, like fantastic moves. I'm just going to take the bishop. I know he can win this knight. And in fact, he can just give me a checkmate. And that's the end of the game. That is the end of the game, but I think it's going to be an interesting one to analyze how I got so comprehensively slaughtered by a 1688 in 17 moves. How did this happen and why is he waiting? Just give the checkmate. What is he waiting for? I mean, he played a fantastic game. And now he doesn't see checkmate in one. Maybe he's just waiting for me to resign. I'm going to start looking back through this game in the meantime. This was theory. At least up until now. I don't know about knight f3. Maybe that's not theory. And in fact, now I'm only now recalling that in the Alapin, very often you do play this knight a3 idea. And perhaps here would have been the time to do it. Okay, so now he gives the checkmate at long last. Let's try and analyze this and hopefully learn something from this, because something is going very wrong for me these last few games. And I haven't been able to work out exactly what that is. So let's have a look at the game. I think this is all fine. Even just playing bishop e2, my position still is fine, I believe. Castles, he brings the knight out. I think this knight a3 move is fine. Even after takes, I come here and jump back. I think here I'm still fine. And the computer agrees, like, it's nothing special, but I'm doing just fine. But after this move, I think I played this bishop g5 idea, and this is where, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. So after takes, was it the fact that I took the knight that was so bad? Yes, indeed. It's gone from an even position to completely crushed. Completely crushed. So what was I supposed to do? I suppose I should have taken with the pawn, would be most natural. And why not? Why not open this file towards the king? I mean, my fear was that he's going to take this knight, and after I take back, he's going to take my bishop, which is a very good fear to have, because that would give him a very large advantage. I guess the thing was, if I take like this, if he takes my knight, as I think I mentioned in the game, I don't have to take this right away. Perhaps what I do is give a check. And maybe the way to do that, I mentioned maybe I could do it with the rook. I think that's probably wrong. Yes, it is wrong. But, you know, I'm seeing sort of now, maybe I should have done it with my queen, because my queen now defends the bishop. And I've given a check. So once he deals with the check somehow, let's say moves the king out the way, well, then I can take the bishop back. I'm hitting the queen. and my other bishop is defended. And he can take this pawn, but I guess in compensation for that pawn, I can bring a rook to the d file, gaining some speed against this queen. And the game goes on, and actually still black is slightly better. So something still hasn't gone quite right, but nevertheless this would be a lot better than what I actually did in the game, which was just simply a tactical blunder. And from there was absolutely nothing that I could have done. And he just finished the game off clinically. Absolutely clinically. Now, if we just go back a few moves to the start, because I am planning to play this opening, I should know a thing or two about it. So in this position, was I right to play knight f3? I suppose so. And after bishop g4, bishop e2. Yeah, bishop e2 is fine. Now he played e6. I was wondering a lot about c4. I didn't end up playing it. It would have been, okay. It's basically a drawn sort of type of position, but castling was better. So that's good. And after knight c6, knight a3 was not too bad, maybe not the best. How did it compare to maybe knight d2? Knight d2 would be not good. I assume that's because it takes the pawn, as I mentioned during the game. That seems to be the case. So if it's not knight a3, it's not knight d2. Was it, after all, this idea of bishop e3? Bishop e3 looks like it would be quite nice. I wonder about even bishop g5 straight away. No, definitely not. And again, same reason. Takes, and he's removed the defender. So that's kind of like the definition of a shaky position, where you have a certain structure. Let's call this a structure. And the structure can just have the legs taken out of it, and everything else falls as a result. So you don't want to build those types of structures. You instead, I think, want to build structures that will stand the test of time. And comparatively speaking, even though it's much less exciting, bishop e3, knight a3 wasn't too bad, but bishop e3, where it's defended by a pawn and it itself defends this otherwise potentially shaky pawn, thus enabling us to play knight d2 later on, etc. This is much more solid of a structure, much more likely to stand the test of time. So look, I'm going to play one more game, just to see whether we can play a bit more solidly. So I'm going to end this video here, and we'll create one more video, one more training game for this evening. See you then.